There are certain people on YouTube who make everything look effortless. The sun rises over a cornfield, the tractor fires up, the harvest rolls in, and the whole thing looks like an advertisement for the American dream. Laura Wilson, better known to millions as Laura Farms, built her entire platform on that image. A young woman in Nebraska boots, camera in hand, doing the hard work, and bringing the world along for the ride. But for the past 2 years, something has been growing underneath the surface. Rumors, questions, accusations, comments that got sharper and louder with every upload. Was the farm actually failing? Was her marriage in trouble? Was the whole thing falling apart behind the scenes while the cameras kept rolling? Now, Laura has finally addressed it. And the full picture, what she confirmed, what she shut down, and what it actually reveals about the reality of being a young farmer in 2025, is far more interesting than any of the gossip ever was. This is what has really been going on with Laura Farms. To understand the rumors, you need to understand how fast all of this happened for Laura Wilson and how little time she had to prepare for any of it. She was born on May 11, 2001 in Hamilton County, Nebraska, into a farming family that goes back 5 generations. Her great-great-grandparents emigrated from Sweden and settled on Nebraska land in 1910, founding what became Carlson Farms. That legacy expanded decade by decade: hog operations, cattle herds, irrigated row crop farming across more than 2,000 acres. By the time Laura was growing up, farming wasn't just something her family did. It was who they were. At 13, Laura started her own small cow herd. As a teenager, she detasseled corn on her family's seed fields, worked as a nanny, held jobs at a local school, and at one point seriously considered becoming an athletic trainer or joining the military. She studied business administration at Southeast Community College in Lincoln and was pursuing further coursework at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Whatever direction she was heading, she always ended up pointing back toward the land. When the pandemic shut the world down in early 2020, Laura made a decision that quietly changed everything. She was 19 years old. She went back to the farm, started renting 160 acres from her grandfather, and began farming on her own terms: corn and soybeans, South Central Nebraska, learning every single thing from scratch. She had no hired crew, no professional setup, no plan for what came next. She just picked up her iPhone 8 and started filming. One of her early Twitter videos, a short clip filmed from inside a tractor cab, walking viewers through the controls during corn planting, caught fire online. Within days, it had crossed 1 million views. She posted it to YouTube on April 25, 2020, and watched in disbelief as the numbers kept climbing. That video now sits at over 1.2 million views and counting. Laura Farms was born completely by accident, and within months it had an audience that most creators spend years chasing. The channel grew in a way that was almost impossible to fully process in real time. The raw footage, the unfiltered mistakes, the honest look at what farming actually involves. It connected with people in a way that polished content never could. Viewers weren't just watching someone farm, they were watching someone figure life out in public, and they couldn't look away. By the time Laura was 21, she had hundreds of thousands of subscribers. By 22, she had crossed 500,000 on YouTube alone. She was being covered by Nebraska Life magazine, featured by Pioneer Seeds, and partnering with companies like Universal Motion Components and Chief Industries. The girl who started filming on an iPhone 8 and editing on iMovie was now one of the most recognizable farming influencers in the country. And in the middle of all of it, she got married. On December 19, 2020, the same year the channel launched, Laura married Grant Wilson in Central City, Nebraska. Grant is also a farmer. They had met back in 2016 when Laura was still in high school, got engaged in August 2020, and then married just 4 months later. The timing meant that her entire public identity and her marriage essentially started at the same moment. There was never a version of Laura Farms without Grant in the picture, which also meant there was never a version of their relationship that wasn't being watched. Grant became more than a husband. He became her business partner, her full-time co-worker, and the other half of every decision made on that farm. Every piece of equipment financed, every acre planted, every loan signed, they carried it together. When things worked, they celebrated together. When things didn't, the weight landed on both of them equally. And the audience was always watching, always interpreting, always ready to build a narrative out of what they thought they saw. That pressure, which started small, would eventually become something much harder to manage. As the channel grew, so did the scrutiny. That's not unusual for any creator who reaches a certain level, but farming content carries a specific kind of skepticism that most niches don't. Some viewers started asking whether any of it was real. Comments appeared questioning whether the financial struggles shown on screen were genuine or were just content strategies, manufactured drama to drive clicks. Others went further, suggesting that the YouTube money was the only thing actually keeping the farm afloat, and that, without the camera, there would be no operation left to film. The criticism also came from people within the farming community. Some felt Laura made the lifestyle look too polished, too manageable, too accessible, that the vlog format smoothed over the brutal reality of what independent farming actually involves. Others respected her completely and found her representation of agricultural life more accurate and more honest than anything else on the platform. But the comment sections were rarely calm. Every video brought a new round of analysis of her tone, her expressions, her choices, what Grant said or didn't say, what wasn't shown versus what was. The audience had become invested in the story of Laura Farms to the point where they felt entitled to answers about things she had never offered for public discussion. And then the hard years actually started. You can only document real farming for so long before real farming shows its worst side. Laura had always been transparent about the challenges: broken equipment, unexpected costs, weather disruptions, the constant stress of tight margins. But what came over a stretch of particularly rough seasons went beyond the usual bad luck that every farmer deals with. The first blow that really rattled the audience was the worker situation. In the middle of a demanding season, a hired hand quit without any warning. On a small independent operation, a person walking out at the wrong time isn't just an inconvenience, it's a crisis. Tasks that had been distributed across multiple sets of hands were suddenly down to 2. Laura and Grant scrambled in real time to cover responsibilities that neither of them should have had to carry alone during one of the busiest stretches of the farming calendar. The audience watched it happen. Then came the insurance battle. Laura had suffered significant crop losses and filed a claim expecting the process to work the way she had planned. What followed instead was a frustrating, drawn-out back and forth that left her feeling like the system had failed her. She documented parts of it, turning her own experience into something that resonated deeply with farmers across the country who had been through the exact same thing. The comments on those videos weren't just supportive, they were raw. Thousands of people sharing their own stories of insurance promises that didn't hold up when they needed them most. Then, a bridge on her property collapsed during harvest season. This wasn't metaphorical. Laura uploaded a video with the straightforward title, "Bridge Collapsed on the Farm," showing exactly what had happened. A field access route gone at the worst possible time, when every hour and every gallon of fuel counted. The logistical knock-on from that alone would have been enough to test anyone. And then she was forced to harvest in heavy snow. Crop quality suffers. Margins that were already thin got thinner. The physical toll of working through those conditions, on top of everything else that had already gone wrong, was written on her face in the videos from that period, even if she never said it directly. Laura herself had already hinted at the financial pressure openly on social media. She posted on TikTok with the caption, "New to the fleet, I'm in massive amounts of debt." Half joking, but also completely honest. That kind of transparency was exactly what had always made her audience trust her. It also gave people who wanted to spin a negative narrative exactly the material they were looking for. Somewhere in early 2025, a specific strand of online speculation crossed a line that most of the previous noise had stayed behind. The divorce rumors started the way these things usually start, through observation. Viewers noticed that Grant was appearing less frequently in recent videos. Someone pointed out that, in certain frames, Laura's wedding ring appeared to be missing. That was enough. The comment sections erupted. Then the posts started, then the Facebook groups, and finally the fake accounts. Accounts using Laura's name began messaging fans directly, claiming to be her, claiming the marriage was over, encouraging people to reach out to her because she was going through a painful split. None of those accounts were real. None of those messages were from Laura. But on the internet, speed travels faster than correction, and by the time anyone thought to verify the source, thousands of people had already accepted the story as fact. The harassment that followed was significant. People who believed the fake account started flooding Laura's actual channels with questions, sympathy messages, and in some cases outright cruelty. Others posted about it as though it were confirmed news. The whole thing took on a life entirely separate from anything Laura had actually said or done, which is what makes this particular cycle of rumors worth examining closely, because it exposes exactly how these false narratives form and spread. Grant disappearing from videos, he was farming. Laura's ring not visible in certain angles. Cameras don't capture details that clearly. These were the raw materials of a story that had no basis in reality, fed into an algorithm that rewarded engagement, regardless of whether that engagement was built on truth. When Laura finally addressed the full picture publicly, the response wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a tearful confession or a defensive rant. It was measured, honest, and in some ways more uncomfortable to watch than either of those things would have been, because it was real. She confirmed that the operational hardships were genuine: the worker who walked out mid-season, the insurance battle that wore her down, the bridge collapsing during harvest, the snow harvest that damaged the crop. She didn't minimize any of it. She acknowledged directly that there are seasons where you do everything right, and it still isn't enough, that the financial pressure is constant, and that keeping a small, independent farm alive in the current agricultural climate is genuinely hard. She shut down the divorce rumors completely. She and Grant are together. They celebrated their 4th wedding anniversary in December 2024, and they shared it publicly, not as a performance, not as a rebuttal, but simply because that's what their life actually looked like. 4 years in, still farming together, still choosing each other, still building the same thing they started in 2020. What stood out most in how she addressed everything wasn't the specific details. It was the broader point she made about what it costs to do this in public. When a young fan told her she wanted to be exactly like her, Laura didn't give the polished, motivational response that most influencers would reach for. She responded with the quiet honesty of someone who knows exactly how heavy this life is. Not to discourage, but because she felt that the full truth was more valuable than a clean story. That honesty is what the rumor cycle had been distorting all along. The people circulating stories about her marriage falling apart and the farm crumbling weren't engaging with Laura's actual story. They were building a fictional one on top of it. There's a reason Laura Farms resonates the way it does. And it isn't just personality or consistency or the novelty of a young woman in a male-dominated space, though all of those things matter. It's because what she's documenting is genuinely rare. Independent young farmers are disappearing. The economic structure of modern agriculture is brutal for anyone trying to start small and build from the ground up. Land values have climbed to levels that make ownership nearly impossible without generational wealth or significant debt. Input costs, seed, fertilizer, fuel, equipment, remain at levels that squeeze margins to breaking point. Corporate farming operations have the scale to absorb the bad years that wipe out smaller operators. The 2024 crop season was rough for farmers across Nebraska and the wider Midwest, and 2025 brought its own set of financial pressures. The industry is not designed for what Laura and Grant are trying to do. She is doing it anyway. On 160 acres, some owned and some rented, with cameras rolling, with an audience of millions watching every setback. That combination, real farming, real stakes, genuine transparency, is what the rumor cycle could never quite account for. People who wanted to see failure in her story couldn't separate the difficulties that are built into the profession from personal collapse. Every hard season looked like the beginning of the end to someone who didn't understand what farming actually involves. Laura understood it from the start. Fifth generation, born into it, she knew the bad years come. She knew the insurance battles and the broken equipment, and the moments of genuine exhaustion aren't signs of a failing operation. They're Tuesday on a working farm. What's changed is that millions of people are watching Tuesday now. Laura Wilson is 24 years old. She farms 160 acres of Nebraska soil, manages one of the most watched agricultural channels on the internet, runs a merchandise line, handles sponsorships, and does all of it alongside her husband in a partnership where the personal and professional are completely inseparable. For 2 years, a version of her story was being written by people who weren't there. People who watched fragments of her life and filled the gaps with whatever narrative fit their assumptions. A collapsing farm, a crumbling marriage, a content creator running out of road. None of it held up to the actual facts. What Laura confirmed is both simpler and harder than the gossip. Farming is brutal, money is tight, bad seasons happen in clusters, and none of that means the story is over. What she shut down was a fictional version of her life that had taken on enough momentum to cause real damage. Fake accounts, harassment, misinformation spreading across platforms to audiences who had no reason to question it. The divorce didn't happen. The farm didn't collapse. The rumors didn't stick because the reality underneath them was always stronger than the noise on top. She plants, she films, she keeps moving. Boots caked in Nebraska mud, debt and all, carrying a fifth-generation legacy forward one harvest at a time. That's the story. It always was.